Hello, welcome to Econometrics Melody. In this tutorial, we'll deal with the commands graph query schemes, graph query graphics, set auto bar, auto tab graphs, set scheme, set print color, set copy color graphs, graph print, graph set, graph export, graph manipulation, and palette. First of all, we'll create our data sets. Let us use our first command called graph query, and this will list the available schemes and styles. These are the styles used, like addedline style, alignment style, angle style, and so on. So if you write a graph query and then schemes, this will give you a list of the available schemes. So these are the schemes, and if you know, these are the styles, and if you want to know in details about these styles, you can type graph query addedline style. So this is one of the style that we are taking, addedline style, and these are the styles that were displayed earlier. So I have written it over here for our convenience. And if you see so this is default, extended, and unextended for this style called addedline style. And in order to know something about it, you can always type help addedline style. Now let me write graph query and addedline, and you see what happens if so this is the same thing. So here that you need not write this style, okay? So you can simply remove this style and write graph query color for this, graph query compositor for this, and so on. Now let us use all of this. Now for this local est, a local variable est, I have added this styles, some of these styles, and I'm running a loop, for loop, and to query all these styles, and let me see what happens. So for these styles, you see the last one here is function style. So function style, you have this, and you can play around with this. And then for connect style, you have these options for connect styles, or styles actually for connect styles. And for compass direction style, you have these options. These are simply the direction, center, or actually the position. Color style, or simply color. So the styles of the color, you have these styles, black, blue, and so on. These are useful, and you can specify these options for the color styles. Okay. So the remaining, so we have tried up to this. Now let us begin from function type style all the way to Mercury style, and let us see the for loop is going to ease our job. Okay, you see the last one is Mercury style, and this is the Mercury style. You can specify these options for the Mercury style of these styles, for marker size style, marker label style, so on and so forth. For line width style, these are the thickness, actually width of the line, and for line pattern style. So these are going to be very useful. Let's try the other one. I have also written a loop for this, for each loop, and these are the remaining styles, beginning from orientation style to XYZ to type style. So what are the styles available? So these are the styles, and you can play around with this. These are very useful. Take a style. So in case of confusion, you can always type this query, graph query, followed by these styles. Now let us move to our next command called graph query graphics, and we can query graphics will help you identify the default schemes. So these are the default schemes. You can play around with, you can set the graphics, you can set auto tab graphs, you can set a scheme, you can set print color and copy color, and these are the options for print color and copy color, automatic, AG, GS1, GS2, and GS3. Now let us see, set auto tab graphs off. This is AGT. These are the default actually. Set scheme, S2 color, and if you want to change the scheme color, you can choose from this one, S2 mono, S2 manual, S2 color, all the way to Economist and ESJ for Stata journal. Now let me set the print color to automatic. This is the default, and set copy color also to automatic, and you can choose and play around with this automatic AGs. These are the options. for this. Now let us go to the next command called graph print, and this is very useful if you want to print your graph. First of all, I'm going to draw a graph pie chart for this. So this is our graph. Now let me graph set print logo off. So this print setting, actually it is print setting, and we don't want the logo of Stata to appear in our graph. So first of all, I'm setting this print logo off. Then after, I'll print this graph. Okay, graph print command, and you see this pop-up window. A window will pop up, and then what is the name that I want to give to this graph? So let me give this name, and I will replace this. Let me save this. So okay, I'm gonna replace it. I want to check whether I am able to save this graph in the way I wanted it or not. So this is my present working directory, and this is the directory where my PDF file is saved. Now I want to open this. So this exclamation sign is equivalent to cell, S-H-E-L-L, and we can invoke the operating system from Stata2 file as well. So I'm going to start the file that I have saved. Okay, so let's say this is the file that we have saved. You see, as we have set the print logo off, so we don't see any logo of the Stata over here. So we're not. Now this is another way of opening the same file. Let me open the same file, and you'll see this file over here, and this is the graph that we have saved. Now let me change back the directory to its original position, and let's see, this is the original position directory, and let me discard this graph. Okay, this will be exposed. Now let me set some of the graphics. So set graph, this will help you set graphics options, and basically we will set the printing option, the exporting option, and then the font of the graphs that appears in the graph. Let me graph set, and graph set, this will give you these options. So this is the options regarding font. So is it font? Graph set, sorry, EPS, this is about the export. EPS and PS, these are of export, PostScript, and encapsulated PostScript. So this is for PS. These are the options, and we can manipulate this. We'll talk about this. And this is for printing, logo off, top margin, left margin, and then this is about how do we want our font of the graphs to appear. Okay, now let us see them in detail. First of all, let us draw a graph and name it P1, and then let me set the window. Set window its font. Okay, so font to Arial Black, and let me now open the next graph and name it by P2, and you see there is the difference in their font. So we have opened this graph without changing the font. Now we have changed the font to Arial Black, and this is the differences that we see. So there are various fonts, you can play around with this. Now if I call the first graph P1, now you see its font will change. Its font will change to this Arial Black. So if I display this, you see the change in the font, if you notice it. Now the font of this graph has also changed. And the graph 2, if we display this graph 2, its font, actually it was already in this form. Now let me graph set window font face default. Now if you want to restore the default font, then you use this command. Now let us go to the other option called PS. PS is for, let me minimize this for our convenience. Now this is about another set is about export. It is PS, PostScript, and EPS is encapsulated PostScript. Graph set PS, let us manipulate this. So what happens, these are the options, you can set them. Graph set PS tmargin to this, graph set PS logo off, graph set PS cmyk off. So these are the options. Now let me draw the graph once again, and let us set this. Okay, graph set PS, this is T margin is top margin, left margin, graph set PS logo off, graph set PS cmyk on, graph set PS orientation is portrait, and these are the options for PS. Now same is the case for EPS. Graph set EPS So it's encapsulated, post scripted. These are the options that you can play around with this, and I have written some of them over here, and these are the details for EPS. So we'll say the logo off. This is used for exporting. You can manipulate this setting for print. So graph set print, and if you type this command, you will get the options for printing. So logo, we want to put it on or off. If you specify the logo edge on, then for the graphs that you print, you will see the logo of Stata, but we don't want it in this case. Okay, export the graph. Another command is to export the graph, and we can export the graph in this format. These are the extension: PS for PostScript, PDF is PDF, PNG, TIF, and others. And let us say this. Now let me draw a graph. This is one graph, and let me again draw another graph, two line. This is a line graph. Okay, two-way graph, two-way line graph. The first one is pie chart, and this is the line graph. Now graph display P1, we have our graph P1. It will display it does not matter. Now let us graph export P1. So this active graph will be exported and saved in the name PDF, P1 PDF, and saved in the PDF format. And if you want to check this whether this has been saved or not, we can call it. So this is the PDF file, this is the graph, okay, that we have saved. Now let me save other graph as well. Graph display P2, and let me save this graph called P2 in the name P2 PNG format this time, and let me export and run this. Okay, so I have saved this in the form. So this is, if you see, this is the format PNG, and this is very useful command. Now let us use graph manipulation command. We have dealt about these commands, some of these commands in our second video number 2. Graph dir, this will display or list the directories that contains graphs. So these are the graphs. We can describe the graphs. Let me describe some of the graphs. You will see these descriptions. And let me use the graph called remit. So this is the graph that is stored in the disk, and we have used this. Now let me use another graph, DEM1. So this is the graph, this is also in the disk. I'm calling this graphs, and graph rename. So the graphs in the memory, they are renamed. P1 is in our memory, now it is renamed to P2. This is temporary kind of renaming. So this will not rename the graphs that are present in the disk, only rename the graph that are present in the memory. Graph copy, this is also a temporary kind of stuff. So we have copied P2 and named it as P10. And graph drop remit, so the graph remit is dropped, that in the memory that is dropped. Again, this is also a temporary. This will not drop the graph that is in the disk. We'll have to use the option called erase for that. Graph export P1 is PDF and replace. So we have done this already. Exporting the graph. Graph display P2, if there are P2 graph that will be displayed. So this should be active actually in somewhere here in the forefront. Now graph combine. So let me combine the graph and display it in the column form. Okay, so we are going to combine P2 and P5. Both are in the memory, P2 and P5. So this is graph P2 and this is graph P5. We have combined, and why did it appear in the column form, in a single column? Because we have specified in column. Now let us combine the other two graphs. Here we are going to combine the graph and then remit GPS. So this graph by default, if you draw any graph and if you don't rename it, so that appears with the name graph. So remit graph, it is in our disk, and we are going to combine this. Now in the they will appear in the row form. So if you see this graph, the name of this graph is graph, graph, after combination of P2 and P5. So this is a graph. So this graph will be combined with remit in the row form. Now this will appear in the row form, and if you want to see it for yourself, and it will give you a very nice one. You see, this was the graph. Now it is in its row form. This is a single row for this because this is a single graph. And you see again, by default, the Stata will save any graph, not save, rename the graph is graph. Now let me discard this. So this card will drop automatically the loaded programs. Now let us see our last command, that is palette. This will help you display the palette, different color composition, and we're going to describe of the palette about color, line palette, and the marker palette. So this is the graph. Now let us write palette color. This you will see this color in the RGB. So this is the palette for this RGB. This is equivalent to cmyk, cyan, magenta, yellow, and k. This is equivalent to this. This is in the RGB format, and this is in cmyk format. And this scheme is economist, and here we have specified cmyk, so we get this thing. So this will help you understand the color. Try to choose the color. Okay, what are the palettes? Color palettes. So this is the scheme ES1 color, and this is in the form cmyk. So this is color cmyk, and its RGB equivalent is this. So palette color green, and we have the intensity is 1.5 times. Okay, S2 mono, this is the scheme, and cmyk, so it's 1.5 times. Now let me take the yellow, and its intensity is only 0.5 times the yellow. And it is Stata journal is the scheme cmyk. We are going to specify HSV 3 colors 1 2 3. So this is the HSV, and its cmyk equivalent is this 1 2 3 4 255. Let's try this for the line palette. So this is the line palette for scheme Stata journal. These are the lines, and these are very simple. That will help you see how does it appear for each scheme. How does the line palette appear for each scheme? This is for economist, and this is for your S2 color scheme. The line palette appears in this form, and this is the for the scheme ES2 manual, and these are the schemes over here. You can look this. Now this is a bit in bold format. Now let us try the same thing for symbol palette. So the symbols that we use, like triangle, circle, square, the graphs, this circle, this is diamond, triangle, square, plus, into, and so on. This is for economist. Okay, this may appear if you apply the scheme economist. This is the symbol palette for ES2G manual, and you can play around it for each scheme. And how does it appear? This is the for ES1 R color. This one is for ES1 mono. And another one is for ES1 manual. These are the schemes. And this one is for Stata journal, especially for Stata journals. The symbols appearing in Stata journals are this format, and there is a symbol shown at larger than default size. Okay, so we know about this. Now if you want to know about the color style, these are the list of the color styles. I have color styles I have written for our references, and this may be helpful. Although you can always type graph query color or color style, and you will see these details. This is it for this tutorial. Please take your time in understanding this. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, Econometrics Melody.